All right. Welcome, everybody that's joining. Welcome to another episode of Relationship-Led Growth Live. We've got a fun conversation today, I hope.
You guys, I'm on a live. You gotta go out.
Apparently we got some extra live guests.
Oops, sorry, thinking I was on mute. There you go. There's a live episode for you.
You can tell your kids that they've just been live. That's got to be exciting. Anyway, welcome everyone. Like I was saying, we've got Max Traylor with us today. Max, welcome. You're making the rounds in all of our shows. So welcome back, I guess I should say. Max, I'll let you do an intro talk about yourself for a second here too, but you're obviously a service design expert, if I may call you that. Is that fair?
Sure. You can call me that. I'm not allowed to call myself an expert though.
Well, there you go. Exactly.
I'm but a weary traveler.
All right. So we're going to be chatting about growth for consulting and advisory firms, and we're going to be talking about the intersection of what we're calling strategic activation and service innovation. So how do we build the right services that we can then create content around and drive business development activity around? So that's the general premise. To kick us off, something interesting. I had a conversation with a very successful, I guess now ex-consulting firm founder. I think he's still the chairman, I believe, and he's got a bunch of other businesses. But when I was chatting with him about what made them successful, he mentioned a number of things, but one of the things struck me as really interesting. And he's like, people in our space forget that you just got to build new shit. Meaning we just have to keep innovating and creating new services because that is what our clients expect. I thought that was interesting. And Max, you being the service design expert, my words, not yours. What do you think about
that? Well, without the context, I'm not sure I agree with it. I mean, it sounds nice, but I come from a mindset that in professional services, you have to be able to rely on a process. And so, sure, there will be there will be new market forces. There'll be new situations that your clients find themselves in. But to say I need a new service, I think you run the danger of cannibalizing your own positioning. The market gets to know you for something. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity to build things to strengthen your service, new studies, or, I talk about benchmarking studies and having your own proprietary data a lot, having tools that complement your services. Sure, those are cool things, but to say, oh, our service yesterday was this, and because the sun is, or Mercury is in retrograde today, we have a new service. I think that's really tough. If the more strategic you get, I think the more lasting your value proposition is. We can help you create stronger relationships with your clients. The fundamentals of psychology and relationship building, they're not going to change year over year. But if you position yourself more tactically, maybe around technology, then sure, you're going to have to reinvent your services constantly. But I think most consultancies are trying to establish that more strategic relationship. And so again, probably lacks context for me, and great conversation to have, because I think that's what we're talking about. What is the balance between innovation and running a business? Because you can't just take your whole services business and say, hey, everyone, I know we were getting really good at delivering on our promises in this area, but now there's something totally different that we're going to do. So yeah, fun story. I'd love to talk to your friend there.
Yeah, and I think maybe to add some context to it, I think thinking back to the conversation, it wasn't as much about, hey, we have to create something new, like a brand new service, a new service line every year, whatever it is, but it was definitely more around, adding things in around that core service offering in terms of whether it be tools, like you were saying, or innovating on that, maybe creating a better delivery model or whatever it may be, like those types of things. And then obviously, I do think that it is important to keep an eye on, like you talked about, market forces and see, okay, as a part of growth, well, some of our options can we create a new service that we can deliver to the same client base?
Yeah.
That's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah. I think we're getting closer to it. So, like formally, I go to war against the services menu every day. I think it is the most evil, detrimental thing that you could do for your company. Look at the menu of our services, client, you pick. Like that's a restaurant, bad business. I've never run one, but that's what I hear. So I'm all for a singular services process. This is Mike and Joseph's secret sauce. You begin at A and you end at Z, no questions asked. Now, you're allowed to deliver that in different formats, and that's where you get the operational efficiencies. That doesn't cannibalize your positioning. You may deliver that process as a book, as a workshop, as a $100,000 consulting engagement, as a fleet of carrier pigeons. I don't know. So that's where I think market forces may determine, okay, you need something more short-term, pay as you go because everyone's freaking out because there's a pandemic going on, versus we're going to sign people into our normal 3-year recurring contract. So, that may be different. But the other thing to yes, innovation is cool, but I think probably the most underestimated opportunity for a consultancy is the opportunity to eliminate things that are no longer relevant. Like, people want to raise their prices because they want to make more money. Another way of making more money is doing less stuff. And I've developed the habit of asking my clients on a quarterly basis, what is the most useless thing I've done for you? And then you just take it out. You say, great, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't do that anymore? And for the next client, you just don't do it. And that has been probably a more powerful mindset than trying to add new things.
Yeah, I love the concept of growth by elimination.
Yeah, like ask a client, would you like value slower or faster?
Yep.
Cool. So eliminating things will get you there faster. It's just a matter of what's that game? Jenga, where it all don't remove the wrong block. That's the game.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the same holds true when we talk about on the promotion side, if you will, and talking about activation. We oftentimes go after this. I think we can use the same analogy, like this menu of here's all the things that we could do. We can do LinkedIn, we can do podcasts, we can write a book, we can do research, we can do all these things. And sure, over time, you might end up doing most or all of those. But what are the things that are really moving the needle? And especially if you're looking at more shorter term results, what are the things that move the needle the fastest?
Yeah.
Focus on those, perfect those, and then layer things in.
Well, and most people will agree, because it just keeps getting said over and over. The 90-10 rule, 10% of what you do is going to be 90% of the value. So your value is not the 100 things that you could do. You only have one service. The service is helping your client determine what is going to be most impactful and doing that thing. That's the service. It never changes.
Yeah. How do you approach this? I'm curious, because run into this on the activation side all the time with these multidisciplinary firms. Take your average mid-sized boutique management consulting firm that has 8 different practice areas, right? They might be industry based. That's usually an easier one, but a lot of the time it's not industry based. It's it's actual practice areas. Over here we do technology consulting. Over here we do, change management consulting, and over here we do whatever else, right? How are you looking at that are you looking at each of the practice areas as in almost like individual sub businesses and thinking about what's the core thing that each of those offers?
Yeah. So the ones that I perceive as successful, let's just go industry first, for example. Uh, those teams function as their own consulting practices. They generate their own demand because of their specialty. They have a subject matter expert that is the provider of the intellectual property, and they have consultants that continuously learn. So that is its own, and they don't cross pollinate with other industries, because why would you? I mean, maybe you share ideas, but you're not going to bring a manufacturing consultant to a whatever, fill in the gaps.
Yep.
So there's that. For the practice area, I think that to the extent that they have different practice area disciplines can hurt them unless they have an overarching offer, because different practice area divisions, that can really broaden your focus. In other words, eliminate your market advantage of standing for something, of being known for something that's good. However, let's say you do 3 or 4 things really well. There should be an overarching consulting service that says, I am going to help organizations grow. And the way I'm going to do that is by helping them navigate through these 4 core disciplines. And so I've been brought into these organizations around the time when they're doing some mergers, or they're launching a new service, and they're saying, we don't know how to market ourselves, which is another way of saying our customers don't even know what we do anymore. Like we want to stand for something. And so what the heck do all 4 of those things together represent for your clients? That's how you should go to market. That's the first thing that you should sell is strategy. And a natural byproduct is going to be the sale of more consulting or products or services in those categories.
Yeah, and I love that. And because this is actually a point where I would say there's this intersection between the service innovation and the strategic activation side of things, because one of the things we run into pretty consistently in these multidisciplinary firms is you start talking to the practice leads and they go, oh, well, over here, our ideal customer is this group, and over here, our ideal customer is this group. And there's zero overlap or very little. And you're like, okay, that's awesome if this was an individual business, but you're all part of a whole, and now you have no way to cross sell. Like that's a problem.
Well, yeah. Who decides like what ICP is going to get the advertising investment, or the subject matter expert, the book that they choose to write, or the event that they're going to go speak at? Like you can't be everything to everybody. So how do you do that? You don't have different marketing departments. So I think they're just lying to themselves. But I think technology, this is especially the case in consultancies that relate to technology in some way. Marketing agencies are always inextricably linked to technology, sales in many cases. And these technology firms survive by adding features. Oh, we're going to go from a marketing tech stack to we're going to add a sales tech stack. Now we're going to add customer success. And the only problem with that is then they tell their service provider, value added resellers, that you need to add expertise and bench and market yourselves as all of these things. And it destroys their competitive advantage, their margins, and their people.
Yep.
I mean, Mike, we've been talking a lot about alignment between your team, and a great way to destroy alignment internally is to create an environment where people have to fight and play politics to be able to get the resources they need to grow their area of business. And if they happen to be on the top, they're going to get an outsized portion of the budget, and they're going to grow, giving them more political impact. And then kind of creating an environment, a cultural environment, where people have to have infighting to be able to get the resources they need to do their job effectively. And how are you supposed to create a company that's going to grow effectively if you're encouraging that kind of culture from the beginning?
I did it to people who were working for me. You know, it sounds like, hey, Max, I do A. I noticed the last 4 things that you sold were B. And Darren over there got a raise. Darren over there is posting on LinkedIn about how awesome he is. Darren over there has a badass career path. I'm sitting here getting old. I'm going to go somewhere where my work is appreciated and is actually like what they stand for, because I want to do something with my life.
Yep. I think it's definitely a big component to employer brand and employee satisfaction for this, is like you were talking about, for sure. Something that comes to mind is how the marketing side of things, like you were talking about, you said, well, they don't have multiple marketing departments. And something I find interesting is, yes, that's true. One of the things that we found, though, is depending on the size of firm, and once they evolve to a certain point and grow to a certain point, that the team structure actually needs to change, in the sense of you start getting a little bit more decentralized in some of the marketing resources, because you have this practice area that, yes, you need this overarching thing like you were talking about. But you have this practice area that's very specific, does have a subset of the ICP, specific problems, pain points, etc. You ideally need like an embedded, content marketer, maybe a few other folks, depending on the size of firm, that are just focused on that, so that you're not consistently fighting for those resources.
Sure. Is that a question?
No, it's more of a statement.
Yeah, sure. But I'm thinking about this, like, COVID did something really interesting. It made us all recognize that we can work from home and be okay. Most of the people in corporate world either went through the went through the oh no of I might not be employed anymore. So many of them dabbled in side gigs, solo consulting.
Mm-hmm.
Consultancies should be asking themselves, what do I actually provide to my consultants that they can't do for themselves? And it's not consulting. Like, they can consult on their own. Consultants can either consult or they can't consult. It's like a born thing. What they provide, for the most part, is brand recognition and the marketing might to employ them, reduce the risk of self-employment, and feed them business. So if you are not focused and showing that you're willing to stand for a certain value proposition, invest in that value proposition, what is a consultant's like? Why would they stay? Why wouldn't they go to another consultancy that's focused on their practice area, or why wouldn't they just build their own personal brand around that practice area?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting, because what we see quite often actually is, it's almost, I don't want to say completely the opposite, right? But you have, partners at these firms that some of them have contractual requirements to, bring in business and do their marketing and things like that. And sometimes they don't even get the resources. So they're like, at that point, like you just said, well, why not just go out on your own? You're pretty much doing it anyway in some of these firms, at least.
Yeah, well, at that point, it's the safety of employment, and for a lot of people, they need that. They're at the phase of their life. It's a smart business decision for them, and I think every consulting firm should look at their consultants as a driver of new business. Every single one of them should be investing in their personal brand.
Yep.
But I also don't see the expectation there, nor do I see the compensation structure, the incentive structure to get them to do that. Like, you want your consultants bringing in some new business, give them an attractive revenue share agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And provide
Say, hey,
them
I'll help
with,
you publish a book. You bring me a client, I'll help you publish a book. I'll make you a superstar. I'll get you a client tomorrow.
And it's also, making sure that they have the resources available to them on the, on the marketing side and whatnot, and the assets needed to do the business development. And, because that's a typical thing that we end up having conversations with these consulting firms around. Usually they're, stuck in some sort of growth plateau, and it's, well, we have all these marketing assets, but they aren't really specific enough anymore to our particular practice area or whatever it is. We can't really use them. So now we're just creating our own stuff, but we don't have the time for it either. So now they're kind of in this weird spot where they're under-resourced. And maybe if they're getting the right compensation structure, okay, maybe that's all right. But even then, like, you got to give it's more than just the comp, right?
I don't know. I have no desire for employees ever again. But I think that if I did, I would say, look, if you do these sets of activities on a regular basis that elevate your personal brand, and obviously that helps the company, we will on a rewards basis in tiers, we will invest in your personal brand, whether it's advertising, whether it's the writers to help you take the interviews that you're doing or whatever and turning that into content, whether it's hiring a brand firm to elevate your personal brand. Like, we are going to invest in you if you invest the time in you. And the only thing that would kill that is if you don't build in the time for that in their role. If you overutilize them, if you say, okay, your salary is X and you're probably going to burn out with 4 clients. Here's 6 clients. And you know why I have to give you 6 clients is because we just lost 3 senior consultancies because we couldn't figure out how to incentivize them or give them business, the whole problem. But I think it all comes back to, selfishly, a lack of productizing your services, unselfishly, a lack of positioning and standing for something.
I mean, to me, something I've seen with clients that we've worked with or prospects that becomes a big challenge the more that you have diversified services is, yes, like, who are you in the market and how do you actually position your company? That becomes really difficult, because if today you're talking about financial services and tomorrow you're talking about management consulting and you've got all of those different things, it's hard for people to want to follow your brand because they don't know what to expect. They don't know how that content's going to be relevant showing up in their feed. But the other element of it is the limitation of resources that you have internally. And the more service offerings that you have, the more different groups that you're trying to reach, the more different materials you have to have. You've got to have, if you're doing financial services, now you have to create decks for that. You have to create website pages for it. If you're going to take a page out of our book, you got to have some type of show or, something that's getting out there to create content with your ideal customers. And each of those takes resources. And the more you spread out, the more your resources will be spread then. And it's really difficult to operate that way.
Well, it's difficult to operate that way, but also no one cares about marketing if it doesn't result in new business. You have to win business. So let's say you had all the money in the world. Everyone felt supported. Everyone felt pampered. Oh goodness, this organization is great. I could make something up and they'll put $1 million towards marketing it. At some point, that prospect is going to say, like, who have you worked with like me lately? Or what have you done for someone like me lately? And they're probably going to call up someone that's a specialist in their area during that time of consideration, and you will lose 9 times out of 10. So don't talk to me about leads or opportunities. Talk to me about clients that sign up and stay. And I don't care if you're having hundreds of conversations, you're going to lose 90% of them to someone that is specialized in their area, and you're paying that person for access to their lifetime of knowledge, not to learn their business or for the one consultant you have in that practice area that you just snatched up from some other failing consultancy.
Max, something that you're kind of alluding to, but I think it'd be helpful if you dive into this a little bit more, is you could specialize on or productize in a lot of different ways. You could productize based on a very specific service offering. You can productize based on an industry. You could productize based on, size of company and what you're solving for them. So like, when you're talking about productizing your services, what angle do you take and how far do you take that? I mean, because you could get down to the nth degree where you're like,
No, so here's how I define it. Positioning, sales process, and delivery. So like, I disagree with what you said in that you can just productize the service itself. You can't. because you can't deliver the same service to a dairy farmer that you do a $50 million software organization. You just can't. So you can't talk about product without talking about positioning. Like you can't, it's just about thinking about a service like you would a product. If you make a shoe for a human, you can't market that to water buffalo. It wouldn't fit. The shoe didn't fit. You got to quit, or whatever the thing was. And so you have to, like, when you productize something, it means that you deliver the same process with the same expectations and you charge the same price. That requires a decision of who you're helping, how you're helping them, what they get, how they're going to get it, and how they're going to pay you. And if clients look like different contract lengths, different industries, different services, they start with different things, they end with different things, you have not productized. And let's throw the word productize out the window. You're just running a super complex, high administrative burden, high churn services organization that nobody can repeat what you do. That's the business you're running.
Yeah, I think the core of it really is that 100% the positioning side of things, because it's literally everything you're going to be doing goes from that.
Yeah.
Everything you'll be doing on the marketing side, everything you'll be doing on the delivery side, it has to start there. And there are these, I think with the core positioning elements, there's the, what problem do you solve and who do you solve it for? And then that ICP needs to get very, very, very specific. We have these conversations all the time. And it's like, well, so who's your ideal client? Well, we've worked in Fortune 500, but we've also worked with smaller companies, and we've worked in this industry and these other industries. Okay, fine. But what does your ideal look like? I understand you could, in theory, maybe do this for a broader set. Okay, but who is the ideal? Well, and you start going to this, and then I oftentimes have to ask the question differently. Okay, who are some companies that you would not do business with, that have some sort of criteria that you're like, oh no, that's not a good fit for us? And then things generally start to click a little bit, because like, oh well, we have to make sure that they have this person on staff, otherwise the project just goes off the rails. Okay, so if they don't have this person on staff, that you can't work with them. Yes, all right, cool.
But as somebody trying to refer someone business, how the heck would you know if they have that person on staff? You know what I mean? So I agree with you. It's like, I've been through the pain myself of genuinely, like, I like you, Joseph. We're going to pick on Joseph for a second. I like you, Joseph. Who can I introduce you to? Oh, anyone under the sun, Max. We work with dairy farmers, SpaceX, chemical manufacturers, and I'm just completely overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know, who do you want to do business with next? And they're like, oh, anybody that identifies as a human being. And it's like, geez. So a way to short circuit that is to just say, look, if I asked you for a reference, who would you introduce me to? Because everybody has that ideal client in their head. And if you can put them into that situation of like, the deal is done, I just have to talk to a reference, somebody that you've absolutely killed it for, that's going to vouch for you day in and day out. What is that person's name? And then you go on LinkedIn and you answer the question for them. What is their role? What is the industry? What is their background? And you say, you know what? Maybe you should focus in this area, because smart clients at some point should ask you, can I talk to a reference? And you better have a darn good answer.
Yeah, I love that, because that they generally have a hard time deciding who it is. Again, the way we've generally done it is, well, tell me who you would disqualify, and then usually when you're talking to the salespeople, they go down that road. But I like the question of tell me who your reference is.
It short circuits everything wrong with the organization. Like if there was a gun to my head and I said I had to make an introduction to somebody, that's what I would say. I would say, tell me about your best client. Tell me about the reference that you always give. Okay, do I know someone like that? Because I can't introduce somebody and say, oh, this person does marketing. It's like, okay, I've been solicited by 1,000 marketers on LinkedIn in that little other category where they send me in-mails because they buy them, and they're like, Max, do you need do you need help selling your services on LinkedIn? I'm like, you obviously didn't look at anything that I do. So my kids have arrived and now they're screaming. So I feel for you, Joseph. Oh, and by the way, if you can't consult and do live shows with 2 children screaming in the background, you're not a real consultant. You're not. I'm just gonna throw that
Damn
down.
it, we only have the one. So I guess I'm not in that case.
Well, no, you're there. You're a part of the
screaming.
I'm a childless dog. Does that count?
yeah,
No.
but people are like, I'm successful. I run I'm like, how many kids do you have? They're like, I don't have kids. I'm like, wow. Call me in a year, bud.
So that piece around positioning, I want to kind of circle back to. I think is critical. I'm curious, at what point do you look at, if we're talking about like net new service innovation, what are the triggers that you see that make sense in terms of like, oh, we need to go after this new market that we haven't been going after, or hey,
yeah,
we're going to create this new service for the same client base that we already have. Those are the two.
I got a good answer for that. When you start losing deals to someone else, you got a problem.
So you wouldn't do it prior. You wouldn't like proactively go.
Why? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm doing great. I'm raising my prices. I've got demand. Let's change everything. Like that's a recipe for, and I get it. You got to innovate. You're gonna look forward and everything. You may change little things, but like if I want to add something to like AI. Okay, AI is a perfect example because every single person is wondering, how do I handle this? Do I incorporate this into my positioning? What do I do? And in some cases, you can say, well, look, my positioning is to help businesses make the correct decisions and allocate resources appropriately. AI is just the newest thing. So of course we talk about that. And we bring in experts that are experts in AI, and they may be gone tomorrow. But like
they weren't an expert yesterday, but they are today.
Yeah, right. So but they fell asleep and then they missed the whole thing. So like experts come and go in these different tactical areas. So I would just hesitate to attach myself to anything tactical that's going to change quickly, because you're going to have to constantly reinvent yourself. And I don't think you've done the exercise of asking your clients, what is the most strategically valuable thing that I've done for you? What would you tell somebody that you're introducing me to? They're not going to say, oh, Max has a really good template for reaching out to people on LinkedIn. They're not going to say that. They're like, Max helped me go from a 5-day work week to a 3-day work week by slapping me around and telling me to get rid of most of my services. He simplified my business. I'm making more money. You should talk to Max. And those fundamentals aren't going to change on a daily basis. So what was the question?
Well, I do have a follow-up question.
The question is, when does it make sense to layer in something new or go after a new a new
segment? A new segment. So first of all, I am not qualified to answer that question because I do not advise clients to like productize or go into areas that they do not know. My business is, what do you know that is most strategically valuable and difficult to replace? Let's make that the best service it can possibly be. That's my area. However, with that mindset, there are periods in my life when I'm like, I can't ignore this anymore. Like if I was doing content strategy, which is where I started, I am going to be losing deals to position them to people that position themselves around, hey, I'm using AI to accelerate content growth and get all these things. Like I have to deal with it at that point.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think I also, you said where you're losing deals because of it. I also look at, I think there's at some point in a business, there's a like some opportunities are just too big and too good to ignore as long as your foundations everywhere else are solid. So I guess the way I look at it is, let's assume you're going after your core target, your core ICP is mid-market. I'm going to use us as an example, is mid-market mid-sized consulting firms, right? That's our core. We pretty consistently right now get interest from, we get people who reach out that are too small to currently use the services we have, just the way that they are currently designed. Okay, it doesn't make sense for them from a cost perspective. We're not going to do this now, but at some point, if that continues and everything else is in a solid place, we're going to probably go, okay, we can take these pieces, productize them into more workshop-based type things, and sell that to a smaller type of consulting firm. It's still a consulting advisory firm. They're just not at 50 million. They're at 3 million or 5 million or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't consider that a new service.
No, and yeah, I guess I look at it more as like a new sub-segment of their overarching market, right?
Yeah, and I saw Joseph. Joseph's smiling because we started talking about this in the last show we did. So like, this is exactly my point, is that if we're talking about service innovation and saying, okay, we've now decided that we're going to make dumplings because all of our clients are eating dumplings on our consulting calls, so we think that'd be a great addition. Like, that's freaking crazy, and it's actually a microcosm from what's happened a lot out there. They just randomly decide, oh, we're going to do this thing. But to say like, hey, we've got this segment of our clients, and they can't currently buy the packaging, the way we have packaged and priced this process, perhaps we can take the same process, same value proposition, same industry, same like 9 out of 10 things, and just deliver it to them differently. Instead of doing it over 3 months and applying our team of 5 experts, we're going to do it in a 3-hour workshop.
Yep.
And they can afford that. But there's the innovation is minimal. The innovation is just in the process. It's not in the value proposition. It's not in it's not in, you don't have to understand something different about their business. Like, they're still consultancies. They're just smaller. They have similar challenges. So that is where I think people need to innovate.
And pricing. And
yeah,
that turns into how you deliver the product.
Yeah, I call it, different delivery. Like, I look at somebody's website and they say, I have the umpty-ump process, and I don't see a services menu. I go, this person's going somewhere. This is good. And then but they do have options. They say, oh, buy the book, get my coaching, do a 1-day workshop, see my keynote, consulting, very high ticket, I'll hold your hand. It's all the same services process. It's just, how would you like to pay for that? That's cool. I can get down with that.
So here's a question for you. When's the right time, do you think, to, because I see companies struggling with this a lot, both from a marketing and activation perspective and from a service design perspective, in terms of when's the right time to make that leap to the, whatever that tier up or tier down. I feel like tier down is easier, but that's maybe a separate question.
Like, invest in a different delivery format?
Yeah.
The answer that comes to mind is when you need to. Because, like, okay, when I was younger, I associated value with, like, all right, I'm at a 1-to-1 service delivery now, and to be a man and show progress, now I need to create the mastermind group and have the 1-to-10 format, and then I need to license it to hundreds of companies. As I get older, I'm like, look, you got to figure out what matters first. I want to play golf? I want to be there for my kids, and I need to make enough money to do that. In that case, it's very difficult to convince me to spend the time innovating and building a different team to support the administrative burden of more clientele. I'm good with like 1, maybe 2 formats of delivery. So I think that people get like there's way too many conversations with vendors where somebody gets like some bright idea and they're like, yeah, let's spend 6 months of our lives building a course that we're going to sell for $100 to executives. And here's a concept. They're going to watch these videos and they're going to change the way they run their business. Like that doesn't make any sense. But it was like, and then you're like, well, how was business before? They're like, oh, it was great. Like business was great. Everyone was happy. Like, why change the format? And I do hear a lot. You sort of brought this up, Mike, is like, well, you know, we're having all these conversations with companies that can't pay us. And so now we're going to spend a year building something for those people. I heard once from a very wise person, they said, if you choose to work with people with no money, you will soon have no money. So I would challenge the folks that are like, we really need to focus on the people that don't have money. How about you improve your service? How about you make it more efficient, more effective? How about you invest in your marketing to the people that can pay you money? How about that? How about that's our focus?
Yeah, I think to me, it's always getting that core, whatever that core is, as good as it can be first before you go and start doing something else and going after the different people. Like I feel like it's once you've tapped that, once you feel at least that you've tapped it, either you feel it or ideally you see, if you got the numbers behind it, say, okay, well, looks like we're at a certain percentage of market share. That's probably as far as we're going to be able to get here with the volume of competition that exists, et cetera, et cetera. If we want to keep growing at an accelerated pace, we have two options. We either layer on a new service to these same people, or we take this service and distill it down to the next level down. I feel.
Yeah. So you're right. Like I'm sounding very opinionated because I am opinionated, but
we're both opinionated people, so it's all good.
Yeah, but it's good to do it live too because you can't take it back. But you know, you shouldn't have a conversation about building something completely new without someone in a chair going, wait a minute, how do we improve the thing we're already doing? Because at the end of the day, like nobody is motivated or should be motivated by creating something new. That's narcissistic. That's crazy pants. They should be motivated by the valuation of the company or profit, or in my case, how much free time I have. So like it's a new thing is a means to an end. And the game is, how do I achieve that end with the least amount of effort, least amount of pain, least amount of, whatever is cost benefit analysis. So I think people just get shiny object syndrome. I had shiny object syndrome for years.
Well, I see it all the time in, again, these multidisciplinary like management consulting firms, because their problem actually is, oftentimes, at least from what I found, is on the activation side. They've never figured out the engine to get them more client. Like they've never figured out who their ideal client is, first of all. Then they've never figured out how to build the engine to get them more of those clients. So then they go, well, we need to grow. Let's bring on this consultant and start this new practice area because there's an opportunity there. So they grow by this multidisciplinary growth. And then at some point, they completely flatline because they get all the stuff that we talked about. There's very little overlap between the ICPs. There is no solid engine. Everyone's doing their own complete different thing. There is no overarching, narrative and message and offering and all that. So then they're like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah. Well, it's like,
they're back to where they were before, which is, well, we need to grow to make opportunities for our people, but we can't grow because we don't know what to do now.
Yeah. You need to build an engine that keeps demand higher than supply. If your supply of people exceeds the demand, you're desperate. You'll start chopping prices. People are going to live like you're toast. David Baker talks a lot about this in his Business of Expertise book. If you're selling expertise, you have to keep demand for what you do above the supply of what you do. That keeps you in control.
Yep.
And so you have to build an engine to do that. And you can't sit there and say, well, I'd like to build an engine. We've got a bunch of diesel fuel here. We've got a bunch of batteries, and we've got fossil fuels. Can you build an engine for me? It's like, you're going to have to pick one, because I could build an engine for any of those things, but I can't I can't combine them. What are you talking about? Like, what do you want me to build an engine for?
One thing that I would find really interesting to hear from you, and we haven't talked a whole lot about activation, so it might be helpful to kind of dive into that a little bit too, and how the two tie together. But
I was actually going to go there too, if you want me to.
Yeah. So just maybe you could give us a 1 minute example, which is definitely not enough time for the question I'm going to ask you, but keep it brief.
I'll start my timer. This will be a challenge.
What would be an example? Like, tell me about a time when you worked with a client that was in a multidisciplinary space, like what we're talking about, that just basically an example of productizing a service where you saw the company transform from, hey, we're kind of doing all these different things for all these people, and instead they focus more.
Yep. It was a technology IT service thing. If you like, their services menu made me want to vomit. It was actually like doable. Like, you clicked services and you could see it on one page, but like it was almost on page 2. Like that's the amount of services. So they were under pressure to increase recurring services. It's like, where do you even start? And I was like, guys, we're not doing this. We are going to create we're going to create an overarching strategic service. We called it the let's call it the XYZ system, because I don't want to call them out specifically. Let's call it the XYZ system. And the XYZ system is the first thing we're going to sell to clients. The value proposition is essentially, we're going to help you identify your greatest areas for growth in your business. But it had to live on top. There's no way to, like, with the services menu, it's just hopeless. So you got to create a single point of entry, which looks like get leadership aligned, benchmark their capabilities, and create a roadmap of solutions. You charge for that, and then underneath that, you have all the projects, right? But that strategic consulting service, the proof point system, if I was calling you out for it, there's a proof point system. You have to buy that. It's $10,000 a month. You get our best thinkers, and we're going to help you decide where to spend your money. By the way, we also have these other divisions that may be a good fit for you. We've got relationships out there in the marketplace. They may be a better fit for you. But like, when people ask what you're doing with us, we are helping your leadership team decide what is most important, who to spend money with, how much, what they're going to do.
Love it. And there is actually a proof point system.
I bet there is. And I know you're working with the best. I know you're working with the best. It's not me, but I know you're working with the best. The people that
we're working on getting reformulated a number of our things. So this conversation's actually, a lot of it is validation for the work that we're doing right now ourselves too. So Joseph, you're talking more about the activation side. And actually, I think a core thing that's important to point out when we're talking about this, the intersection point is, once you have this, Max, what you just described, and you have this productized service, and that's tied to your core positioning, it is so much easier to create activation plans around it, because you can, once you're that focused, you can create whatever. I'm going to go very tactical, but you can create a podcast, let's just say, that is very focused on that, and telling that POV, talking only to the right people if it's an interview style thing, and then having plans all around it about how your biz dev team is going to leverage that asset and how they're going to activate and what the topics are going to be, all this stuff. If you have the services menu, if you will, and you don't have that positioning, you end up with, like, you can't do it. You literally can't do it, because there's no way for you to focus enough to make that asset actually usable and worthwhile from a business development activation perspective.
Yeah. So I want to know what you mean by activation. So before I go on a rant about activation.
So the way we define it is, what you generally see, like, kind of the typical, sales and marketing setup is, there's a bunch of marketing created content that gets put out there, and the business development or sales is just out there doing their own thing. Sometimes they use the marketing assets, sometimes they don't. In my opinion, sales enablement function it doesn't really exist in professional services for the most part. Some larger companies it does, But that entire function has been, in my mind, developed as an intermediary between marketing and sales to help sales better activate. When the real solution actually is to have it be an integrated system where the activation plays, if you will, like how business development is going to use the asset, is brought up at the very beginning in the development of the asset itself. So again, if I'm going to just use a podcast or a live show format as an example, because it's an easy one to explain. If we've decided, hey, you know what, we're going to create a show. Okay, awesome. First of all, why do we believe that we can invite the right guests on the show? Do we believe that that's a format that our target audience is going to listen to? Okay, cool. As long as that's there, fine. How are we going to use this? How is the business development team going to leverage this asset in their efforts? Are they going to do outreach to get guests on the show? Are they going to use this in their outreach? Say, hey, so-and-so, you might be interested in this episode or in this show, whatever it is, right? So it's figuring out how it's used in the business development sense first, before marketing goes and spends all this effort and creates this thing that otherwise likely doesn't get used at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing proper strategic thinking, not investing or building things that aren't aligned with a business objective. So it's kind of funny because what you're saying is if you do it properly, activation doesn't exist as a concept. Activation only needs to exist when you don't think about how these assets are going to be used to achieve a business result from the beginning. But if you do,
I would say, in my mind, it's still the activation part is the activity of leveraging the asset by business development. But
okay, so there's a big. So if you want to talk about like when does it stop becoming strategic and more about implementation,
yeah,
I talk about that a lot.
I mean, I think a way to say it is activation is the business development team doing the right next steps to start conversations and nurture the relationships with their ideal clients. And if the less clear your marketing assets are and the less tailored they are to doing that, the less likely and the harder it is for your biz dev team to actually do the right activities to generate relationships. But the piece that still is at play, even if you've got all the right assets in place, it's kind of a change management / accountability piece that has to be in there for activation, where are those guys actually doing it? Why are they not doing it? Are we missing something? Do they not actually know what to do or have the right tools, or do we have the right people in the right seats on the bus? And that's why they're not doing it. Those are all I'd put under the activation category.
Yeah. I mean, so what was the question again? How do you get people to activate? How do you make sure they use the stuff that you build?
I don't think it was more of a question. It's more of it's more of a statement around you can't do it this way until you have the positioning and the service designed to build all of this around, right? Because at the end of the day, you're not. I think where I see sometimes these companies go off is they think of, oh, well, it's brand marketing. We're going to create a brand. Mm-hmm. Okay, but what's the brand about? The brand is about this core positioning and the service you're offering. If it's not, then it's not really brand marketing.
Yeah, and the sales guy has zero interest because it does not align with what they get paid for.
Yep.
And
why would they invest their time in creating something that helps the brand?
So there's your problem with activation, is assuming that everyone cares. There's your first problem. You got to bring those people into the room and say, hey, we got some people here that care about the brand. Salesperson's going, I couldn't give 2 shoots about that. Oh, director of sales, what do you care about? Oh, I care about adding new logos to the bench. Great. So if we put together a process and we invest in creating some things that helps you put new logos on the bench, would you make sure that your people knew that process and how to use the things that we create? Yeah, I would make sure. You're gonna have to be pretty confident that it adds new logos because they don't have a large attention span. Then you have a hope. So you can't just have a strategy and make a decision as a leader to invest in marketing without translating that and actually enabling people to use it. You can't just say, hey, salesperson, we're going to give you a marketing asset. They're like,
But the funny thing, Max, is you're saying
Cool.
that as if
That's
it's
exactly
obvious.
what happens
But yeah, it's
all
like
the
almost every person that we talk
No.
to on the sales side, they're not doing that. If they have marketing at all, they are just literally creating assets that the marketing team thinks will be helpful.
Yeah.
And then the sales team is like,
here's
yeah,
what you do.
marketing's nice, they'll help me, but I don't actually use anything they create.
Yeah. So here's what you do. You take someone that's not jaded with a 40-year career of doing it their way, and you say, pick a name. Joseph. We're going to use Joseph because Joseph's here. We're not going to get in trouble using Joseph. Okay. So Joseph, here's a process. We've written the process. Okay. And then here's a resource that you're going to use in that process. It's now your job to follow this process. And what we're going to do is we're going to document it. And when you accidentally stumble into new sales, we're going to show to all the other salespeople that this process yields results. You actually have to show them that somebody can do it, and you have to draw them that picture front to back. You can't say, here's the asset, figure it out. You can't say, here's a process that's unproven. You should spend time away from your family and doing the things that you've used for 20 years to put food on the table. Screw those things. It's 2024. It's new generation. Yay, do this new thing with this
social selling. Woohoo!
Yeah. They're like, nah, it's just not gonna work. So you gotta you have to, if you want people to activate, you've got to activate.
But just to tie this back in to the service innovation, because they do really tie together, and I think the point of why Mike's put those together, and Mike, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so if you can use the words to finalize what you're saying. But it's when you innovate on the service and you've created a service that's productized, where it's specific, it's clear, you have an overarching value creation story that you're able to tell from, hey, this is going to get you from point A to point B doing this service. It makes the activation piece something you can actually create a process around. Whereas when you don't have that piece, what happens is you have all these salespeople out there, or you have a younger consultant and you're like, hey, go start selling. And they're like, well, how do I do that? And it's like, well, you make a bunch of cold calls. Well, did you make cold calls when you're coming up? No, I sold to people from college and my college buddies, and that's how we got started, and we've gotten referrals. Yeah. But now you go out and do something we've never done before and hope that it works. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. But if you create that service innovation, you can then really give a clear way for people to activate against it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you can't give someone a process that, doesn't exist. It's a new analogy for me, but earlier I just made it off the top of my head, but I think it fits here. Like if you're giving your salespeople instructions on how to sell a shoe to a human being, you can't have them coming back to you and be like, what are you talking about? All my calls are with water buffaloes. So I can't, you know what I mean? So without creating consistency and opportunities, without creating, and it's even deeper than that. You've got practice area, you've got industry, but you've also got situational. Like, let's say you specialize in helping people transition and sell their company. Oh, let me hook you up with 10 calls of ideal clients, but that are in no way interested in selling their company. They haven't even started thinking about it yet. Sales guys like, what are you talking about? So it's more than just practice area selling the company. It's more than just industry, manufacturing organizations. It's situational. And you got to make a decision so that you're setting your salespeople up for success, so that every marketing investment makes sense.
I'm glad you brought this up. That's actually a really critical point on the activation side, which is you have to, I highly recommend people think about creating assets. And I call these things assets, but that I can help you identify that trigger. It's basics around first party data, like how first party intent data. What can you create that allows you to identify, yep, not only are they the right ICP fit from a firmographic and whatever perspective, but they actually have a need for this right now or in the near future.
Yeah. One of the first, I don't know why I'm stuck on this analogy, but I'm stuck on it and I'm just going to go with it. So I apologize. But one of the first uses for the X-ray was for shoe fitting. So
I did not know that.
So they'd have they'd put people into this X-ray and you could look through it and you could see how the shoe was fitting your foot. And then they figured out that that's a really bad idea. But so, back to this awesome analogy of we make shoes, they're for human beings. Now I'm going to try and supply my sales force with these X-ray machines. By the way, here's 10 calls with water buffalo. Like, those buffalo aren't going to get into that X-ray machine. So it all comes back to who the heck do we serve? That is the only way, making a decision there and reducing the variables. That's what I talk about a lot, is how do you reduce the variables in your service process, the types of organizations you work with, the types of roles, the types of situations they're in. All of those represent variables. Eliminate those variables and you'll get your activation naturally.
Yeah, no, I think the going back to something we talked about very early on here is this growth by elimination, right? I think a lot of the time when you look at these more traditional siloed business development and marketing functions, marketing just keeps throwing new stuff. It's like, well, you can use this thing and you can use this other thing and use this other thing for this. It's like, no. What are the core things that help me identify the triggers that I can use? That's it. And then we can talk about layering new stuff on. Let's perfect those first. I think the same process applies to everything else on the activation side that we were talking about on the service design side.
Yeah. What did you call these organizations? It was like
multidisciplinary.
Multidisciplinary. Yeah. It's very proper way of saying it. So yes, multiple disciplinary firms. You have all these disciplines. Their motivation to get attention is to add. Like, when are they going to come to the boardroom and be like, oh, by the way, CEO, I'll have you know, we actually removed things this quarter. It's very exciting. Let me tell you about what we removed. No, that's not what they do. They are trying to get attention by bringing something new. Hey, let me tell you this cool thing that we got. Could please give us business? Please make me relevant in my life. That's what they're doing in these little silos. So it's only when you do the what was the word again? Disciplinary
growth by elimination. Is that what we're talking
about? Yeah. Disciplinary,
multidisciplinary,
multidisciplinary. Yeah. It's only when you have the opposite mindset where people can even think about growth by elimination, because they're not trying to validate their existence.
Yep. Well, yeah. I mean, I know people are starting to drop off, or we've been talking for a while, probably go for another hour if we wanted to, but last thing out there is you see a lot of these firms also, their growth strategy.
They're leaving to remove services is what they're doing.
Exactly.
Crap, everybody. Time to remove stuff from our menu. But there's growth by acquisition also is a challenge. I think you mentioned that early on when we were talking, right? And a lot of the time it's acquisition of a new practice area and they're layering that in, and now you have to figure all that out. And that's not saying that's a bad growth strategy. There's nothing wrong with growth by acquisition, but I think thinking through that more clearly also in terms of like, hey, okay, if we acquire this firm, what are we doing with our service lines? And think about that up front, not after the fact.
Well, generally the motivation for that is to show consistent top line growth, which is motivated by selling the company in 1 to 3 years. So like I said, you do it when you have to.
Yeah.
If your investors are saying you have to, then you do it. If your plan is to do an exit in 1 to 3 years, you got to make the books look a certain way. You're not motivated by how your consultants feel or your profitability. That's not your motivation. Your motivation is to add logos, and you're going to do it by acquiring firms. Sure, that's your thing. Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's probably a good place to stop. I mean, as good as any, I suppose. I guess we probably keep chatting about this for a while longer. Max, anything you want to leave us with? I know you're.
If you have the ability, if you have the ability to do so, please put your personal life first before you build a business. Build a business around your personal life. That'd be my sign off.
All right. Love it. Max, thank you. This has been fun. Everyone else, thank you for watching, listening, joining, etc. And we'll see you all a couple weeks.